What happens when your body is stopped at a border, but your identity has already crossed it? A steel fence can block a person. A patrol can turn them back. But what if their digital self is already inside, working, earning, living somewhere no government can fully reach? As millions are displaced by war, climate collapse and political instability, a new kind of migration has quietly begun. Not across land, not across sea, but into the cloud. This is the story of the refugee metaverse, and the possibility that the world's first truly borderless society is already forming. By 2026, displacement is no longer a crisis. It's a constant. Rising seas swallow coastlines. Droughts erase entire economies. Conflicts stretch across generations. Tens of millions are forced to move, but fewer and fewer places are willing to take them in. Borders are hardening. Walls are rising. Policies are tightening. And for many, there is simply nowhere left to go. But something strange is happening. Even as physical borders close, digital ones are opening, because today you don't need a passport to exist online. You need a device, a connection, and increasingly an identity that isn't tied to any nation at all. For the first time in human history, a person can be physically trapped in one place, while living economically, socially, and even politically somewhere else. This is where the idea of the digital refugee begins. Not someone who escapes physically, but someone who relocates digitally. The metaverse is often described as the future of the internet. A network of immersive digital worlds, where people work, trade, build, and interact. But for refugees, it could become something far more important. A place of survival. Imagine this: a displaced person living in a temporary camp with limited access to work, education, or mobility. Now give them access to a virtual world. Inside that world, they are not restricted by geography. They are not defined by refugee status. They can work remote, digital jobs, sell services or goods, attend schools, build communities, participate in economies that exist entirely online. Their physical reality remains constrained, but their digital life expands beyond borders, and in some cases, that digital life becomes more real than the physical one. This isn't just theory. Early forms of this are already emerging. Online communities where displaced people gather, not based on location, but shared experience. Digital marketplaces where identity is tied not to nationality, but to wallets, skills, and reputation. Encrypted platforms where governance is not controlled by a state, but by code. Now imagine this evolving further. Entire virtual cities, built and governed by displaced populations. No borders, no immigration officers, no physical checkpoints. Just access and participation. In these worlds, a refugee is no longer stateless. They belong to a network, a system, a digital jurisdiction, one that exists everywhere and nowhere. Traditionally, asylum is something granted by a country, a legal status, a physical relocation. But what happens when asylum becomes digital? What if a platform, a network, or a decentralized system could offer economic access, identity recognition, legal-like protections within its ecosystem, not recognized by governments, but real enough to function? A person could work under a digital identity, store wealth in decentralized systems, build a life that exists entirely beyond national structures. This is the concept of digital asylum. And it raises a radical question. If you can survive, earn, and belong in a virtual system, do you still need a physical country? At its most optimistic, the refugee metaverse represents something extraordinary. A world where borders don't define opportunity. Identity isn't limited by birthplace. Displacement doesn't mean exclusion. For millions, it could mean freedom from bureaucratic systems, access to global economies, a chance to rebuild life without waiting for permission. It could become the first truly borderless civilization, not controlled by geography, but by access, not defined by nationality, but by participation. A system where anyone, from anywhere, can belong. But this vision comes with a problem, because the digital world is not as free as it seems. Access depends on infrastructure. Connectivity depends on resources. And control is still very real. Behind every platform, there are servers. Behind every system, there are rules. And increasingly, those rules are being shaped by governments. Borders are no longer just physical. They are becoming digital. Governments are beginning to understand that control over territory now includes control over virtual space. And they are adapting. AI systems are being developed to monitor online identities, track digital movement, detect unauthorized economic activity. Virtual platforms are being pressured to enforce identity verification, restrict access based on geography, comply with national regulations. In some cases, access to parts of the digital world can already be blocked based on where you are physically located. Now imagine that scaled up. A future where your digital identity is tied to your real-world citizenship. Your access to virtual economies is restricted by national policy. Your movement in digital space is monitored and controlled. The same barriers that exist in the physical world, rebuilt in code. This is where things escalate. Because as control increases, so does resistance. Developers begin building encrypted virtual spaces, anonymous identity systems, decentralized networks beyond government reach. Refugees and digital migrants move toward these systems, seeking freedom from both physical and digital restrictions. Governments respond with more advanced surveillance, AI-driven enforcement, new laws targeting digital anonymity. What begins to emerge is a technological arms race. Not over land, not over resources, but over control of reality itself. At this point, the refugee metaverse splits into two possible futures. Future 1. Liberation. A decentralized, open system where anyone can access opportunity regardless of origin. A world where displacement no longer equals exclusion, where identity is self-owned and freedom is global. A fragmented digital landscape where access is tightly regulated, where identity is monitored, where movement is tracked, where refugees are not freed, but trapped in a new kind of system, one that looks open but is quietly controlled. But beyond technology, there is a deeper issue. Because even if digital systems offer opportunity, they cannot replace everything. They cannot replace physical safety, healthcare, shelter, human connection in the real world. A virtual life, no matter how advanced, cannot fully substitute a physical one. So the question becomes, is the refugee metaverse a solution or a distraction? A way to empower the displaced, or a way to avoid solving the real problem? We are still early in this story, but the direction is becoming clear. As technology advances, the line between physical and digital life continues to blur. And for those pushed to the edges of the physical world, the digital one becomes harder to ignore. Governments will try to control it. Communities will try to build within it. And millions may come to depend on it. So what happens when your body is stopped at a border, but your life continues somewhere else? What happens when identity is no longer tied to land, but to code? And what happens when the first truly borderless society isn't built on Earth, but inside a network? The refugee metaverse is not a distant idea. It's a question that's already beginning to unfold. And the answer may define the future of borders, identity, and what it really means to belong. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the forces shaping our future, be sure to explore our other documentaries examining the technologies redefining modern civilization. And if you want to keep exploring the biggest questions about science, power, and the future of humanity, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next journey into the unknown.